Good morning, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, and delegates to this wonderful conference. First, forgive me, my voice is a little bit on the strain as I'm fighting an awful cold, so if I cough, I hope it doesn't distract too much. But before I begin, let me thank the Nordic Africa Institute, and particularly Fantou Cheroux, and certainly George Washington University for convening this important conference and for affording me the opportunity to talk about the Jamaican experience in the context of the diaspora. I have entitled my presentation, Daughter Diplomat of the Diaspora, because I wanted to do two things in my presentation. One, to share with you my own personal experience and perspective on Jamaica's diaspora movement, which has been somewhat unique, I think, as well as provide some background, highlights, and special issues with which the Jamaican diaspora movement is currently grappling. I will also highlight some of the successes of our movement, which I think especially bode well for its future growth and development. I very quickly add, however, that my presence here at this conference is more to learn than to impart any profound knowledge or perspective on this extraordinarily dynamic phenomenon, which appears to be, at least to me, quietly and with little notice and perhaps even unwittingly, driving policy, establishing trends, and even creating opportunities for native homelands, host countries, and diasporans alike. Allow me, therefore, to begin by providing some background on Jamaica's immigration trend in the last 40 years. 60 years. Jamaica's migration to North America and the United Kingdom began in earnest after the Second World War. Previously, Jamaicans migrated to such countries as Cuba, Panama, Costa Rica, and other Central American countries. Immigration laws, procedures, and administrative systems in Jamaica were adjusted to facilitate the shift. However, the resurgence of nationalism brought more restrictions to domestic laws and regulations governing the movement of our people. In 1947, the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, known as the GATT, in my opinion, reflected the nationalistic approach to free trade, which had its own implications for the migration of Jamaicans and other peoples in the developing countries. Globalization, on the other hand, has brought its own implications, negative and positive, for the region, as well as for the diaspora. The creation of the World Trade Organization, the WTO, in 1994 heralded restrictions on the movement of unskilled and semi-skilled migrants into developed countries, deferring, of course, to the more skilled and professions. While immigration restrictions continue to be a major source of contention between developed and developing countries, including those in the Caribbean, policymakers in the region recognize that globalization involves positive as well as negative elements. They felt it necessary to organize as a region to face the threats and capitalize on the opportunities. Hence, the Caribbean's answer to globalization is what is known as the Caribbean Single Market Economy, or the CSME. It provided a basis for coordinated action in negotiations and for the policy and legislative framework for organizing the resources of countries in the region. Aspects of the CSME provided for the free movement of nationals within CARICOM, or the Caribbean Community, on a phased basis. The implication was that Jamaicans and other CARICOM nationals in the diaspora had the same rights as national residents in the region. CSME, therefore, in its provision for free movement of people and the right of establishment, pointed the way for a progressive and enlightened response to the immigration question in this age of globalization. Jamaica's diaspora numbers approximately 2.5 million, with the majority residing in North America and the United Kingdom. That represents as many Jamaicans outside of Jamaica as there are at home. A United Nations study indicated that 60% of the highly educated Jamaicans live abroad. However, while Jamaicans of any stripe may have left the country physically, their hearts and minds remained in Jamaica. Jamaicans in the diaspora have maintained ties to family and kept second homes there. They return home frequently, send their children home for holidays, And in fact, Jamaicans represent 10% of the tourism market in Jamaica. First-generation Jamaicans maintain a cultural identity as Jamaican, even as they become citizens of their host country, something our government promotes, something I personally very actively do at the consulate. A remarkable phenomenon is that remittances to Jamaica are the largest earner of US currency, outstripping tourism and traditional major exports of bauxite and other traditional products. And it even outstrips foreign direct investment. It is this abiding and unabated affinity for Jamaica by its nationals that has inspired the diaspora movement. Initiated by the government in 2002, the diaspora movement held its first conference in 2004, the second in 2006, and the third in 2008. The event saw greater attendance in each year from Jamaican nationals who traveled from around the globe to participate. The thrust of the government's policy towards the diaspora was to maximize the participation of all Jamaicans overseas who were desirous of contributing to the country's national development. It is not lost on our government that other diaspora movements, such as that of India, China, and Israel, have continued to play a major role in the economic and socio-political development of these countries, as well as the ability of their nationals in the diaspora to affect government, trade, and bilateral policy as regards their homeland. The Jamaican diaspora movement is officially sanctioned in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada. In the US, it is divided into 3 regions: the Northeast, the Southern United States, and the Midwest, and is represented by diaspora advisory boards in each region. The priority areas of focus are health, education, crime and violence, trade and investment, and the role of the church and faith-based organizations. A Department of Consular Affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs provides direct support to the diaspora boards abroad and is the direct line of communication with the diaspora boards. The chair of the boards operate as advisors to the government, interacting closely with and taking counsel from diplomatic missions. There is also the Jamaican Diaspora Institute, in which these activities eventually reside, and all of the operations of the movement, including the Diaspora Foundation. I wanted to spend some time talking about the successes and the challenges of our movement as it exists now. For what it's worth, Jamaica is the first country in the CARICOM to officially launch a diaspora movement. And this is important because what we're seeing now is that other Caribbean countries are kind of looking to Jamaica to see what we're doing. They're taking a lead from us. The earnest and committed involvement in this exercise by the Jamaican government and the diaspora has inspired conversation about and interest by other CARICOM nations in perhaps initiating their own movement. And although nothing yet has come to fruition in terms of a formal movement, countries like Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados are very much looking towards initiating their formal diaspora movement in near term. I believe it's an important step for CARICOM nations in realizing the next horizon of opportunities under the CARICOM small market economy of which I spoke earlier. CARICOM nations' ability to compete in the global marketplace will be profoundly enhanced by the active engagement of their diaspora communities in the repatriation of resources, including skills and currency, and the ongoing formation and development of economic and trade initiatives and foreign direct investment into their native homelands. Another highlight of Jamaica's diaspora movement is the level at which the commitment by diasporans to the work of the movement continues unabated. Jamaican expatriates, in my opinion, have been waiting for this type of structure to find a way to formally and systematically give back to their home country. They yearn for the opportunities to do a variety of things, and we're a highly opinionated people with strong views about how Jamaica is to be run politically, socially, and how best to grow its economy. The fact that we are thousands of miles away has never been a reason to keep our distance from the inner workings of Jamaican society. We are involved in such infrastructure development projects as building schools, funding medical professionals and medical units, building water tanks throughout the country in rural Jamaica, mentorship programs of a variety ranging from K through college area, through college and post secondary post-college work, as well as building and supporting a variety of other infrastructure projects throughout the country. I pause here to share with you a personal anecdote. I was born in Jamaica, but spent most of my formative years here in the United States when I immigrated here in 1968, some 41 years ago. I left at the age of 15 with a family of 6 siblings who would travel to New York to be reunited with our parents, who had been in the States some 5 years previous, preparing for us to arrive. Despite being thousands of miles away in the US, my parents managed to see to it that the home they left behind in Jamaica was run according to their values and as per their rules. This they did through a network of family who weekly visited the boarding schools which we attended. While the schools we attended were strict, it was my parents' values that predominated, and it was they who were the ultimate decision makers on all important matters concerning us. Even after we all joined our parents in the United States, returning to Jamaica was part of our lives during holidays and on special occasions for family events. My parents kept a home in Jamaica, argued about politics with their friends and families over the telephone wires, and at times it felt like we never left. This ability to live in two realities is what has kept alive this vibrancy that is now fueling the Jamaican diaspora movement. It is what has enabled remittances to Jamaica from around the world to exceed $200 million US dollars in 2007. Another success of the movement is its ability to engage young people, not just first-generation young Jamaicans, but post-first-generation Jamaicans, that is, US-born children of Jamaican nationals. These young people identify with their Jamaican roots and are excited about their cultural home. This is especially the case in the United Kingdom, where in the 2008 Diaspora Conference we saw over 500 young people under the age of 25 coming to the country and challenging our government to create initiatives to engage them more fulsomely in the country's national development. My experience in the United States is that young people are eager to find ways to connect with Jamaica. And so we must, in the US, create more effective ways of reaching out to this generation. And that I'm hopeful that by the next conference, the Diaspora Conference, which is in 2010, that the US will have a stronger representation. Another success of the movement relates to the extent to which diasporans invest in Jamaica. At the moment, the most popular investment is in real estate, specifically the purchase of a home. Aside from its monetary aspects, the home intimately reconnects returning nationals to their homeland. This home serves as a base through which they can become increasingly involved in important activities of community life and ultimately engage more sustainably in Jamaica's development. Let me take the next few minutes to focus on some of the challenges, because I think that's where we are meeting some of the most, deadliest concerns in terms of the development of our movement. There is uncertainty about what is the appropriate level of participation and involvement on the part of the government in the diaspora movement. While many in the diaspora recognize the valuable role the government can and has played in getting the movement started and to this point, there is a predilection on the part of nationals to want to constrain government's hand in certain decisions. For example, what is the role of the Jamaican government in the selection of diaspora board members? Who determines the terms of reference with regard to the selection of conference delegation, and who should fund certain initiatives? In addition, diaspora boards are challenged to raise the funds to establish secretariats and the necessary infrastructure to effectively run the movement. Diaspora operations are still, to some degree, an informal exercise. The ability of the movement to sustain itself will depend on having formal places of operation and formal staffing. Further, boards have not yet determined the appropriate organizational structure under which to operate that accommodates fundraising, community representational, legislative, and political advocacy objectives. There continues to be competition between diaspora organizations that predate the official movement, commonly referred to as small d for diaspora, and the big D diaspora initiatives, those undertaken by under the auspices of the official diaspora, big D movement. My own view is that this squabble, if you will, is perhaps a dynamic of growing pains, and that as an operational and representational structures become more defined, the divide will close. The role of the consulate. In March of 2008, I went from being a member of the diaspora to a diplomat. I was appointed Consul General with responsibility for the largest Jamaican mission overseas. My experience as an active member of the Diaspora, founder of the Caribbean American Chamber of Commerce, and founder and vice president of the largest Jamaican diaspora organization in North America, served me well to understand the perspective of the leadership of the diaspora movement and the challenges being faced by the movement at the present time. I understand the emotion, the passion that drives the effort made by the diaspora to maintain the cultural connection and the sacrifices behind the investment of time and money into initiatives to benefit Jamaica. This is real to me, more real than it might otherwise be for a diplomat who enjoys all sorts of privileges and living in the United States without the background of having lived there, having struggled to pull a family and a life. I have no choice but to be shaped by this experience, and I've called on this experience in helping define my role as Consul General in Jamaica's diaspora movement. While there are pros and cons to both points of view on the role of government in the movement, I as Consul General have sought to focus less on the precise role of the government and more on the value added that the consulate can bring to the movement. I use my office to enable access to decision makers, institutions, information, and to foster strategic relationships that could potentially benefit and open up opportunities for the diaspora movement. In this regard, I've taken the position that the process of maturation of the movement, the stage in which we are now, is an opportunity to explore ideas and bring about new paradigms, all with a view of stimulating critical thinking as to how to advance the objectives of the movement and empower its leadership in the process. I believe more can and should be done by research groups, world funding organizations, and institutes such as that which have convened this important meeting to mitigate the isolation and the growing pains that diaspora movements experience in the early stages of its development. To wit, I've created a series entitled From Immigrant Community to Diaspora Movement, which is a series of conversations to inspire critical thinking. Jamaica community leaders are invited to hear from representatives from and leaders in other diaspora movements and their associated governments. All the conversations are followed by a robust question and answer period that I find myself at wit's end to conclude. To date, we've heard from Ireland, the Indians, as well as George Washington University on findings from its research on global diaspora trends. We will wrap up the series with a presentation from China and Israel, followed by summary analysis session. The series is facilitated by one of our own, a well-known professor of political science. Another area I focused on in the development is what's called essential infrastructure component for any successful movement, and that is the database development. One of the challenges facing the movement is the ability of the government and the diaspora boards to systematically and efficiently communicate with the community on a national and global basis. I'm aware that I'm going over time, but let me go quickly to my conclusion. That database will be launched in its first phase with an activities calendar and a database of community organizations, of which there are about 300 in the United States. I conclude by making the point that the diaspora movement is as much about Jamaica's future as it is about the future of the diaspora community itself. In this age of globalization, and even as migration trends indicate that 1 of 10 persons living in the developed country, is a migrant, all of us are challenged as to how to compete and succeed in an increasingly competitive global marketplace. The diaspora movement, whether among Jamaicans or the Chinese, offers fresh opportunities to think anew about our cultural identities and affinities and how we can turn these connections and proclivities into social, economic, and even political currency for the development of mutually productive bilateral and global relationships. Thank you.